Ave Regina, Mater misericordiae, vita dulcedo, estes nostra salve.
Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. Teach me your paths, my God, and guide me in your truth. Alleluia. Alleluia. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. Amen, I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or the smallest part of a letter will pass from the law, until all things have taken place. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do so will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever obeys and teaches these commandments will be called greatest in the kingdom of heaven." The Gospel of the Lord.
This morning I was recalling some past history from my mother. Both my mother and father were born and baptized here at St. Marie's. Their grandparents married and baptized at St. Marie's. And this side of the city, the west side, or as people who would make fun of the French, they would say, the west side. So the west side was all French. The signs on the stores were all French. You see vestiges of it. The St. Mary's Bank, it says La Caisse Populaire. That's the French way to say credit union. My mother used to, the Mass time at St. Marie's, which was their parish, was not convenient, so my mother would go to the church down the street, at the time St. Patrick's, but it was an Irish church, not French. And so one day the pastor said, "That's not going to Mass. That wasn't the Mass. You need to be here. That's where you're going to get the right Mass." And there was this cry among the people. I heard it from my grandparents more than my parents, but the saying was, "Qui perd sa langue perd sa foi." If you lose your language, you lose your faith. Because your core language is what you articulate your prayers in. And also your language reflects your culture. And so what you see here in the book of Kings is a people who have been absorbed by a culture that is paganistic. And to be honest, there are no other gods. There's either God or the demonic kingdom. And so this pagan culture is rife with the demonic. And you could see by the way the guild prophets, the false prophets, are behaving, cutting themselves and all this violence. And so the people of Israel are being absorbed by this culture, and it's very easy for that to happen because there's a place in the book The Imitations of Christ where Thomas Kempis talks about what he calls human respect. And that's not a compliment. It's when I respect the human person or the human opinion over what God says. I respect a culture that is trying to absorb me and even against my faith, but because I want it to fit in. I want it to be accepted. And so I compromise and slide into a culture that is totally against our faith. And this is where the people of Israel are. And Elijah comes to rescue them. He says, how long will you people straddle the issue? And the question stands for us to be exceedingly conscious of the possibility of being absorbed by a culture that can completely destroy our faith. Indeed, it is even destroying our country as we speak. And so what happens for us is we become participants in the gospel culture. The heart of the prayer here of Elijah is all about fidelity. He's praying for people to be faithful, not to the culture that's absorbing them, but to the God who loves them and wants to care for them in eternity. And in the New Testament, Jesus speaks of not being a scandal, to be a respecter of the way God calls us to live. The commandments, it can be, to perhaps lighten up that word, one could say that the commandments stand for the Christian culture. It's the model and the template of what the Christian culture is about. And when we see that in the teachings of the church, it becomes the culture of the true culture of our Catholic faith. And so these commandments are guidelines to live by. Whoever breaks one of these least commandments and teaches others to do so will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. And so we have to become models of the culture of truth, the culture of faith, the culture of our Catholic Christian faith. This is where we must be. Instead of being seduced and led astray for the sake of being accepted and feeling acceptable, the only one we really have to feel accepted by is Jesus Christ.
Regina Celi, letare, alleluia, qui aquae meruisti portare, alleluia, resurrexit sicut dixit, alleluia, ora pro nobis Deum, alleluia.